He left me alone on our wedding night, and at midnight, I heard unexpected sounds. I thought it was going to be the happiest night of my life. Instead, it became the beginning of the most humiliating year I've ever lived through. My name is Rebecca, I'm 31 years old, and 6 hours after I became Mrs. Carter Whitman, my husband disappeared from our honeymoon suite and left me sitting alone in my wedding dress, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The day started like a fairy tale. I mean, isn't that how they always start? The sun was shining through the bridal suite windows at the Rosewood Hotel. My bridesmaids were laughing and helping me into my dress, and my mom kept crying those happy tears that mothers cry when their daughters get married. Carter and I had been together for 4 years. We met at a marketing conference in Boston, and I genuinely thought he was my person. He was charming, successful, attentive. He remembered little things about me. He brought me coffee every Sunday morning. He got along with my family. On paper, he was perfect. The ceremony was beautiful. 200 guests, white roses everywhere. My dad walked me down the aisle, and I could see Carter waiting for me at the altar, looking so handsome in his navy suit. When he said his vows, his voice cracked a little, and I thought it was emotion. Looking back now, I wonder if it was something else entirely. We kissed, everyone cheered, we signed the papers, we were married. The reception was at the same hotel. Dinner, dancing, speeches. Carter's best man made some joke about how Carter finally settled down after years of being the ultimate bachelor, and everyone laughed. I laughed too, but something about the way he said it felt slightly off, like there was a meaning underneath that I wasn't quite catching. Carter drank a lot that night, more than usual. I noticed, but I told myself he was just celebrating. We all were. Around 10:30, after we'd cut the cake and done our first dance and thrown the bouquet, Carter leaned over and whispered that he was feeling overwhelmed and needed some air. He kissed my cheek and said he'd meet me upstairs in our suite in 20 minutes. I said okay. I stayed downstairs for another half hour, saying goodbye to guests, hugging my aunts, taking final photos. Then I went upstairs. The honeymoon suite was gorgeous. King bed with white linens, rose petals scattered everywhere, champagne on ice, candles lit, the whole romantic setup. I changed out of my wedding dress and into the white silk nightgown I'd bought specifically for this night. I felt nervous and excited and happy. I kept checking my phone. 20 minutes turned into 40, then an hour. I texted Carter. No response. I called. It went to voicemail. I sat on the edge of that massive bed, feeling ridiculous in my fancy nightgown, surrounded by rose petals, completely alone. At first I was confused. Then I got worried. What if something happened to him? What if he was sick? I called his best man, Josh. He didn't answer. I called Carter's brother. Same thing. Nobody was picking up. By 11:30, I was furious. This was our wedding night. Where the hell was my husband? I paced around the room, called him 6 more times, left increasingly angry voicemails. Finally, around midnight, I heard sounds coming from the hallway. Voices, laughter, men's voices. I walked to the door and pressed my ear against it. I could hear Carter. He was really loudly, that drunk laugh he does when he's had way too much. And there were other voices with him. Josh, his brother Ryan, a couple other groomsmen. They were talking loudly, stumbling down the hallway. I heard one of them say something like, "Dude, you actually did it. You're a married man now." And they all burst out laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I opened the door. They were all standing there, absolutely wasted, leaning against the walls, holding each other up. Carter's tie was undone, his shirt half untucked. He looked surprised, shocked to see me standing there. "Becca," he said, grinning like an idiot. "Hey, babe." I just stared at him. "Where have you been?" "We were just having a few drinks at the bar," he slurred. "Celebrating. It's past midnight. It's our wedding night, Carter." Josh and the other guys suddenly got really quiet and awkward. One of them muttered something about giving us space, and they all scattered down the hallway like cockroaches when you turn on a light. Carter stumbled into the room and collapsed on the bed, still in his suit, shoes and all. "I'm sorry," he mumbled into the pillow. "I just needed one more night with the guys." I stood there in my white nightgown, looking at my drunk husband passed out on our honeymoon bed, and felt something crack inside my chest. This was not how this was supposed to go. He fell asleep within seconds, started snoring. I tried to wake him up, but he was completely gone. So I changed back into normal pajamas, blew out all the candles, and slept on the couch in the suite's sitting room. The next morning, Carter woke up with a terrible hangover. He apologized profusely, said he didn't know what he was thinking, said the guys just kept buying rounds and he lost track of time. He promised it would never happen again. He begged me to forgive him. And I did, because we'd just gotten married in front of 200 people, and I didn't know what else to do. We were supposed to leave for our honeymoon in Bali the next day. I convinced myself it was just wedding stress, just a stupid mistake. We could move past it. But here's the thing. That night set the tone for everything that followed. Because it wasn't just one mistake. It was a pattern I'd been ignoring for years. And now that we were married, Carter didn't feel like he had to hide it anymore. In Bali, he spent half our honeymoon on his phone, taking work calls, checking emails, barely present. When I asked him to put it away and be with me, he'd get irritated and say I was being needy. We'd have these beautiful dinners overlooking the ocean, and he'd be scrolling through his phone the entire time. When we got home, things didn't improve. They got worse. Carter stayed out late constantly. He'd say he was working late or meeting clients, but he always came home smelling like alcohol. He stopped asking about my day, stopped planning dates. We barely talked anymore, and the intimacy that had been so natural between us before the wedding just vanished. I felt like I was living with a stranger who occasionally remembered he had a wife. I tried to bring it up, multiple times. I'd say, "Carter, I feel like you're not really here with me anymore. I feel like you're pulling away." And he'd tell me I was being dramatic. He'd say marriage was an adjustment, and I needed to give him space. He'd flip it around and make me feel like I was the problem for wanting basic attention from my own husband. 6 months into our marriage, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. It was from a bar downtown, dated on a Wednesday night when he'd told me he was working late. The receipt showed charges for multiple drinks, multiple appetizers, way more than one person would order. I confronted him about it. He said he was entertaining clients. When I asked which clients, he got defensive and angry, told me I was acting crazy and jealous, told me I needed to trust him. But I didn't trust him. Not anymore. So I did something I'm not proud of. I started checking his phone when he was in the shower. And that's when I found the messages. Group chats with his buddies, talking about their nights out, mentioning women's names I didn't recognize, photos from bars and clubs I'd never heard of. Nothing explicitly incriminating, but enough to make it clear he was living a completely separate life that I knew nothing about. One message stood out. It was from Josh, sent a few weeks after our wedding. It said, "How's married life treating you? You surviving the ball and chain?" And Carter's response was, "Honestly, not much has changed. Still doing my thing. She doesn't need to know everything." I sat on our bathroom floor, holding his phone, feeling like my entire world was collapsing. This man I'd married didn't respect me, didn't value me, saw me as an obligation, not a partner. The wedding night suddenly made complete sense. He'd never wanted to be there with me. He wanted to be out with his friends, living his single life, pretending the marriage wasn't real. I confronted him that night, showed him the messages. He exploded, told me I had no right to go through his phone, called me controlling and paranoid, denied that he was doing anything wrong, said I was ruining our marriage by not trusting him. We had the biggest fight we'd ever had. He stormed out and didn't come home until the next afternoon. That's when I knew I needed help. I couldn't do this alone anymore. I called my best friend Sarah and told her everything. She came over immediately, held me while I cried, and told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Rebecca, you deserve so much more than this. You deserve someone who actually wants to be married to you." I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Mitchell helped me understand that I'd been making excuses for Carter's behavior for years. The red flags had always been there. The way he'd cancel plans last minute. The way he'd prioritize his friends over me constantly. The way he'd make me feel guilty for wanting his attention. I'd ignored all of it because I loved him and wanted to believe he'd change. But he wasn't going to change. In fact, things continued to get worse. Carter started coming home even later, sometimes not until 2 or 3 in the morning. He'd sleep in the guest room. We'd go days without really speaking. I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible to the man I'd married. 10 months after our wedding, I found another receipt. This time, it was from a hotel, downtown, 2 nights earlier, on a Thursday. I knew he'd been home Thursday night. He'd come in around 11 and gone straight to bed. So why was there a hotel charge on our credit card? I called the hotel, asked to speak to someone in management, explained that there was a charge on my card I didn't recognize. The woman I spoke to was very kind. She looked up the reservation and confirmed that a room had been booked under Carter's name. Check-in was at 6 in the evening. Check-out was at midnight. 6 hours in a hotel room, in our own city, while married to me. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I called a divorce attorney. Her name was Patricia, and she'd been recommended by Sarah. Patricia was direct and compassionate. She asked me to document everything, every late night, every suspicious charge, every message I could access. She said if I wanted to file for divorce, I needed evidence, especially since we lived in a state where fault could affect the settlement. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly gathering information. I took screenshots. I made copies of receipts. I documented dates and times. And then I sat Carter down one Sunday morning and told him I wanted a divorce. He was shocked, actually genuinely shocked, like he couldn't believe I was serious. He tried to argue, tried to convince me we could fix things, promised he'd change. But I was done. I was so far past done. I told him I'd already contacted an attorney and that he should do the same. The divorce process was brutal. Carter fought me on everything. He didn't want to split assets fairly. He tried to claim that I was the one who'd abandoned the marriage by being too demanding. His lawyer painted me as a jealous, controlling wife who'd driven him away. It was humiliating and exhausting and expensive. But I had Patricia, and I had documentation, and eventually we reached a settlement. We'd been married for exactly 13 months when the divorce was finalized. I kept the condo we'd bought together. He kept most of his retirement accounts. We split everything else. The day I signed those final papers, I felt this overwhelming mixture of relief and grief. Relief that it was over. Grief for the life I'd thought I was going to have. I moved into a smaller apartment across town, started rebuilding my life piece by piece, continued therapy, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage, threw myself into my work, started running in the mornings, adopted a cat named Luna. Slowly, very slowly, I started feeling like myself again. The thing about betrayal is that it changes you. You can't go back to who you were before, but you can become someone stronger, someone who knows her worth, someone who won't accept breadcrumbs and call it love. It's been 2 years now since that wedding night. 2 years since I sat alone in a honeymoon suite, wondering where my husband was. I'm 33 now, single, and honestly happier than I've been in a long time. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm just more careful, more aware, more protective of my heart. I heard through mutual friends that Carter's engaged again. Part of me feels sorry for her, whoever she is. But mostly, I just feel grateful that I'm not her, that I got out when I did, that I chose myself. Some people stay in marriages like that for years, decades even. They convince themselves it's normal, that marriage is just hard, that everyone struggles. But I'm here to tell you that it's not supposed to be like that. You're not supposed to feel alone while lying next to your spouse. You're not supposed to compete with bar nights and buddies for your husband's attention. You're not supposed to feel like an inconvenience in your own marriage. That night, when Carter left me alone in our honeymoon suite, he was telling me exactly who he was. I just wasn't ready to listen yet, but eventually I did, and it saved my life. If this story touched you, please like the video, Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which moment hit you the most. Thank you for listening.